Welcome to another exciting How It Works with Holger. Today's episode is divided up in two parts. You'll learn two things actually. I was thinking about making it two separate videos, but it is much easier to have one overall topic and then splitting up the different milestones that we need to reach inside of the video. In the first part, we're going to look at how to create a master detail relationship in FireDAC. Most of you will know what that is, what a master detail relationship is in a database, but this is specific for FireDAC because most of us have learned database development with Delphi a long time ago, and FireDAC makes it really easy to do this. And second, we're going to use this master detail relationship to create a report with FlexCel. Just as a heads up, if you haven't seen any of my other FlexCel videos, you might not be able to follow because I'm not going to repeat all the content that I have covered about report creation with FlexCel in my previous videos. This is just looking at how to do master detail relationship because it involves, in a nutshell, two data sets, not only one, and that is new with regards to FlexCel, and also how FlexCel behaves to make it all happen and how you have to adjust the template. This is what you'll learn here in this second part. Let's jump right in. The database model that I have used for this, people who have purchased one of my courses, hint hint, might recognize this. This is one of the databases I use constantly because the data in there is created by me, so I can't run into any issues when it comes to licensing. It models my workouts on my exercise bikes. And I use a system here in the United States by a big company, and they have certain instructors that you can basically book to get a workout. Of course, this is all online. I don't book a personal appointment with them. It's all online nowadays. And these instructors teach classes, and these classes are in the items table. So I take multiple classes from certain instructors, and that is exactly the relationship that we have. So one instructor teaches multiple classes, and that is exactly what the master detail relationship inside of our report will show. So in our database model, we have instructors consisting of a primary key, an integer number, an ID, with a name, and this is linked to the items table containing all our workouts, and the items table is linked to the instructor table by the ID underscore instructor field. And that is exactly what we're going to use in FireDAC to connect the two tables to each other. What is so great about FireDAC is we can use more complex queries and we can still keep this relationship intact. Because I want a little bit more information when I link these tables, which we will see in a bit. First of all, here's an example. This is an example for the current instructors table that you will be able to see if you reproduce this example. The example, by the way, will be available in full source code, and the database will be a SQLite database that can be carried easily to your computer. So you don't even need to install a server to reproduce all this. So going ahead, so we have a couple of names with IDs, and the items table has all the different workouts, and here highlighted in blue, the reference to the instructor. So this is just giving you a starting point. If you want to tinker around with databases, queries, and all that kind of stuff, this database is actually a pretty good use case. You can show a lot and exercise a lot with this database. So let's go to Delphi. You can follow along looking at this example going to github.com/holgerflick/examples. That's where you find the source code of all the example videos, including the ones from How It Works. And if you go on this page, you might see just this empty page. And that is actually the intent, that all my examples are available in this repository. So if you were to not use versioning and just click on code and say download the zip, this is what you would get. You wouldn't get the actual source code. So in order to use this, you need to click on a branch. And whenever you go to a video of mine, TMS is going to provide the full link, including the branch name. So right now we're just in the examples repository, which looks like this. If we go to a certain branch, which is associated with the video, for example, recently I did the FlexCel master detail. So you would go to the branch 09 FlexCel detail, and there you find the source code for this precise detail. I haven't even updated the README yet for this. However, if you now go to code download zip, you get a zip file for this specific example. The real reason, of course, that I use this repository, this public repository, is for you to use version control in order to jump back and forth between all the different examples that are offered. And of course, you can create a fork so that you can make changes to the examples and use them on your own repository. That's the main idea behind everything. So just as a quick aside, you can use, for example, Git Kraken, which is a Git client that is available for free as long as you use a public project or a public repository. And here you can see my local branch that I have checked out is this FlexCel master detail. And on the remote, you see all the different branches that are available. So I can quickly switch between all the examples that I offer. So let's check out 09 FlexCel detail, or download the zip file if you want to follow up along. So if you open up the example, you get a main form, which immediately allows you to generate the report, preview the report. I said these are all things that I explained in a previous video. This is the accumulation of everything that you have learned so far and more with the master detail example. But before we look at the report specific stuff, let's look at the master detail relationship for the database. You find that in the data module right here. And in FireDAC, everything starts with exactly an FD connection. The FD connection is your gateway to the FireDAC world and connecting to a database. And it is as easy as double clicking on the connection to set it all up. You start by picking the driver ID. This is a SQLite database. And then in this case, you really can just pick the database on your local system. Of course, remember, if you run this application, this is exactly what would be used. So if you deploy this to another system, this is the path that would be used. So FireDAC offers connection definitions that you could then set up on the target system as well. However, in this case, the easiest thing to do is to simply change the file name of the database when this data module is being created, right? That's what we'll do. Let me point out that the locking mode is changed. I changed this to normal because if you leave it on exclusive, nobody else can access the SQLite database at the same time, especially during development. That is not fun. If you want to have the database open in another tool like Heidi SQL or SQL browser, SQLite browser, or DataGrip from the JetBrains team, that wouldn't be possible because that file would be locked by the Delphi IDE. So leaving that on normal gives you a much better development experience. And then the journal mode is something kind of like a logbook, a history of things that is going on. We don't need any of that because we're just browsing the data. So journal mode is off. That's all the changes I made I think from the standard definitions. So I can click OK. And what I always do is the login prompt, I set that to false because when I would open this data module and I left login prompt on true and the database would be connected, I would always get this database prompt with username and password, which does not exist with SQLite. So that is kind of not necessary. So I simply set it to false. And then another thing I changed is I changed the connected storage usage both to false, or to properly pronounce it, connected storage usage. That's what the property is called. What FireDAC offers us here is that you can, if you set connect to true at design time, and you also enable AU runtime, then FireDAC is also going to flip the connected property to true when you run your application. That is not desired behavior in this case because If that were true, you wouldn't be able to change the name of your database, right? Because right when your application starts, it would try to connect to the database name that you have provided at design time. Not what we want. You can, however, go to the create of your data module, meaning the create event, like here, events on create, or simply double click on the data module. And then the connection params database allows you to set the file name of your SQLite database. And what I do here, I use a special keyword variable from FireDAC, which is $ and then in parentheses run. And then replace it with the directory of your application where the executable is located. Then I simply drill down or go up in the hierarchy and go down again into the DB directory. And this is exactly the database structure or the directory structure that I have. Looking at the examples, and then you see the source is here. So let's compile this application for the first time. I modified the build directory of this example, so it compiles into the binary directory. So if we are in the source directory right here, it will go into the binary directory. Here's our executable. So looking at the source code right here is a executable directory, which is this $run, going up. I always have to say up, it's not down. And then into the DB directory, and this is where the database is. So this is how easy you can build your FireDAC applications with variable database name on your file system. And then also what this does, it generates the report automatically when this data module is being created. So the report is actually being created right away when this data module is being instantiated based on the database information. So we need, in addition to a connection in FireDAC, we need queries, and that is the FD query component. Simply drop them on the form, and then they behave like, I don't really remember I think it was just named tQuery back in the day, that you specify the SQL statement. And the easiest thing to do with FireDAC, you double click on it, and it will open the query editor for you. And the query editor allows you to write the SQL statement. I cut this video to update the SQL statement with RPKs so you can read it easier. Sadly, I can't make this a little bit bigger. So what we select, looking at the database structure again, what is a good tool with SQLite? There is the SQLite Studio. Of course, we could use the embedded database modeler in order to test our SQL statements. Just as an aside, SQLite has great tooling available to learn about the SQL statements if you see a complex statement like this. So what we do here, if you execute it, and this works because I reference the file inside of the connection, so we don't have any disadvantages to a server-side database in this case. So what we do is we select ID and name from the instructors table, and we also count the different instructors that we have in the detail table. So we left join items, all the workouts, and then we say link on the instructor ID to the instructor ID inside of the workout table. So let's dissect this very, very slowly, because this is a very complex query, so to speak. It's not just listing all the instructors, it's also counting the number of workouts that I did with that instructor. So the easiest way to approach this, I think, is if I show you the instructor table, I show you the workout table, and then we build this step by step. Okay, so going from here, let's say we select ID and name from the instructors. If we execute that, I get all the instructors, right? And the problem is that in my report, I don't want to list all the instructors. I only want to list the instructors that I've taken at least 10 classes with, because otherwise I just tested it out. And this is also a great constraint for your reports to see how you can insert parameters to make the reports a little bit more attractive or configurable. And the problem here is that the constraint actually does not refer to the table that we select from, right? Because we select from the instructors table, and the items table now contains all the different workouts. So we have learned, by the way, I named the instructors table, gave it an alias I. So we can now do a left join the items table, which contains our workouts. So I'm going to say items W to give it the alias W. And we want to join on, and this is a little bit tricky for you to understand while watching the video and not having the database schema in front of you. IID W ID underscore instructor is the field that we use. So if I execute this now, I get a pretty darn stupid result because I only select from the instructors table and not from the workout table. So if I were here to add W, for example, name or W title, what is it? It's title. So I add W title right here, execute. So here we get a much better impression about what I'm doing here. So by left joining the items table on the ID of the instructor, I get a list of all the different classes that I took with the instructor on the name. So what I need to do now is I need to group by the name of the instructor and count to aggregate. And that way I have the number of classes that I've taken with that instructor. So instead of selecting the title, I select count based on the WID underscore instructor. So that way I get the count and aggregate. But if I do that, if I execute that now, I get an error. Basically, I get them all because I didn't specify a group by. So for the database right now, I just count all of them. Okay, so I counted all the classes, but I want to group by, and then I also say WID instructor, for example. And if I do that, I now get all the different instructors with the count. That means the number of classes that I've taken. And then I can also order by, and because that is so difficult to write, I'm going to introduce another alias, which I'm going to say CNT for count. So I'm going to say order by count, execute again. This is not what I want, because that would mean right now in my report, I would have the one with the least classes first. That is counterintuitive to me. So I want to order it the other way around. So I'm going to say descending. So I start with the highest number, and you can see this is my favorite instructor, second favorite instructor, third, and so on. And then something I learned rather recently, if I want to only show ones that I've at least taken 10 classes with, I would restrict, I would say where, right? This is what we learned, where a count is bigger than 10, more than 10 classes. And that fails. Misuse of aggregate count. And the key here is to remember that there's the having keyword in SQL, and having does exactly that. It says only select the ones that have a count bigger than 10. So execute now. We have to, of course, group by first, and then having, and there we go. Now I only have the instructors that I've at least taken 10 classes with. And now this SQL statement becomes more readable or better understandable for the one that I had initially. So that is the SQL statement that's in there. It lists all the instructors with their ID and name and count, and only lists those that I've at least taken 10 classes with. The great thing is that I can, of course, print this count in my report later on. Also, there's no parameters in this query. This is always the same query. I could, if I wanted, I could make this a parameter and say, hey, only list the ones bigger than number that I specify. That's the way for you to parameterize this query. Okay, with that, we can go to the key ingredient of this tutorial right now. How do I create the master detail relationship between this? So I have now the names, and now if what I want to do is, if I navigate here, this list, the classes should be shown for this specific instructor. That's where I want to get at. So going over to the classes right here, I do something similar. So this time I select directly from items, and I don't need any aliases because I'm only going to list from items. And what I do is I select where, this is the thing, where the ID of the instructor equals the ID of the master table, right? But what is the master table here? So let's just, the master table has the field which is called ID, and that's why I always, in my child tables that are depend on a parent or a master, whatever you want to call it, I always use ID underscore and then the name of the table that this ID refers to. So in this case, ID underscore instructor equals ID, and the colon here indicates it's a parameter. So for me to test this here right now at design time in Delphi, what I do is I go to the parameters tab, set ID, say it's an input parameter, it's an integer, and it has the value 2. So that allows me to test this. I can execute it, and here I get all, or the query result for the ID being 2, for instructor number 2, for the instructor with the ID 2. In addition, SQLite is pretty lenient when it comes to these select statements. In other, for example, Firebird, I would have to list all the different things that I want to have in there. And SQLite, I can simply say star and comma, and then add to the list of attributes in this case. And what I want to do is I want to have a ratio because I want to have my total output, which is basically how well I performed. Internally, I think it's kilojoule, and divide that by the duration. So that way I have a pretty good idea how well I performed, because if I have more output for a shorter workout, that's better. And that's my ratio. That's something I introduced because I'm going to order all my workouts by ratio in descending order. So the best workout is on top. And I also, if that is identical, but because believe it or not, it will be, because you have workouts that are clearly the same. Your body doesn't change from within a couple of days, so you will have equal ratios. So I will also sort by the total output and then by the date, meaning because it's descending, that the latest workout is always on top. So with that, you might say, there's one strange thing still in there, and there is the total output multiplied by 1.0. What is that all about? And that is one of the biggest pitfalls, I would say, if you work with SQLite, because it is the same as in C# and C. I don't know if it's the same in C++. So this here is the division operator, and division means that the data type is being guessed, so to speak, by the database server in this case. So if I only were to do total output divided by duration, let me just execute this. So here we have the ratio in the end. See, it is definitely a float value. See, 10 point something 666 and so on. But let's say I execute it like this. What happens is it becomes an integer, because both total underscore output and duration are integers. They don't have a floating point value. So what SQLite does, it's going to try and keep the decimals, and it's going to make it an integer too. By multiplying, this is a C# trick or C trick, so to speak, by multiplying it with 1.0, it becomes a float. And then the SQL interpreter says like, oh, well, I need to return a float. So if I execute it now, you get your floating point value instead. So that is one of the biggest questions that you always see pop up when people start using SQLite. Hey, I divided two integers and I get an integer number. How can I make it return a float? So there's the craziest constructs on the internet, especially if you look on things like Stack Overflow. How can it convert the data type and stuff like that? Just multiply with 1.0 and you tell SQLite, hey, I want a floating point value return. So then that yields exactly what we want. Finally, I also add another parameter to limit the number of things returned, max count. Here I set it to 5. You can also do 2, for example, execute, boom, and then we only have 2. This is a parameter that you could add to a report. I'll leave that for you to do later on. We're going to use a constant value in this example. There needs to be something for you to practice, but you could make this variable part of your user interface. So go from here. Okay, that's it. Well, not yet. Right now you have two completely independent queries, the list of instructors and the list of classes for one certain ID. At this point, we need to tell FireDAC that classes depends on instructors. And how we do that? Well, we add a T data source, which points to the instructors. Yes, T data source, we need it, because if we go to the query with the classes, there is a master source property, and this property can be set to source instructors. And then we're done. We don't have to do anything more. Don't read the Embarcadero documentation. Purchase the book from Carrie Jensen, which is called Delphi in Depth, FireDAC. This is where you get the correct information. Don't read the documentation from Embarcadero. Don't read the doc wiki. I tried. It won't work. Use the document. Don't use the documentation in this case. Read the book from Carrie Jensen, and there you learn that you don't need to specify any of these properties here to make it work, as you can see. Just use the same field names as you would as parameters. For example, if I want to refer to the master table, to the ID of the master table, I simply use :ID, because the master table has the field named ID, and that is available because you specified it as a master source. So FireDAC, what it does is it prepares all the attributes as of the master table as parameters. So there would also be CNT for the count, and that works. Like before, I had a mistake in there. I named my limit count and not max count and named it CNT, and guess what? When I generated my report, the limit was always the number of classes that I had taken in the SQL statement. So what FireDAC does, if you specify a master source, it creates or generates parameters for the attributes of the master table and makes those available in your SQL statement of the detail table. So this ID here refers to the field ID of the master table. And what's also so wonderful is whenever you navigate inside of the instructors table, which is the master table, the source, of course, and this is why you might have thought, why do they use a data source? Well, the data source notices that the record changed in the instructors table, notifies the detail table that the record changed. And what happens is the parameter is being filled with a new value and the query is being rerun. So that way, when you navigate the instructors table, the classes table is always updated automatically. Lines of code written, I can only emphasize this at this point. This is why FireDAC is so powerful. 0. At this point, you haven't written a single line, and that is what makes FireDAC so beautiful. And the only line of code you need to write for production is this, in order to make sure when you run this that the application actually uses the correct database. So that it all works, let me run this example, and then you see the report that we're going to create. And then we go over to part 2, how to create the master detail report. Here is the main window with a preview component. I click Generate Report. And there we go. We see the instructors are on top in the heading. And then we have, as said, 5 workout classes ordered by my best workout classes that are inside of the database. And you can see that here, all my best classes have been in 2022, whereas here with this instructor, I also still have 2 classes that were pretty darn good in 2021. That's all it takes for us to have the master detail relationship on the dataset, and this is all that FlexCel really needs. If you have set up the relationship correctly in FireDAC, FlexCel is able to navigate these tables automatically. And the best thing is, with regards to reporting, if we look down here, let's say you want a second category, the year, for example, right? You want like all the workouts, then you want them in 2022, then you want them in 2021, and you want another detail level, so to speak. And this is where you see what a good reporting engine does and what another, I don't want to use an adjective for that, but FlexCel in this case offers you an infinite number of levels. How does FlexCel do that? Well, if we go back to our data module, you can see that we have instructors and classes. We called it master detail. We could also say this is the first level and this is the second level. So you would add another data source to the classes, would then add another query for the classes in a certain year, and the year would then be the parameter for your classes in year, and then the master source would be the data source that points to the classes, and you would have another query, classes in year. You would have then 3 queries. Let's imagine you want to add the month as another level. Well, guess what? You add another query, you add another data source, and so on. So there is no limit other than the memory capacity of your computer, which is in this day and age no longer an issue. You can add as many levels to your master detail as you want with FlexCel. This is really, really one of the pristine things that you can consider with FlexCel. Also considering that you can generate the template on the fly, that you don't have to have a fixed template that we're going to use here. You can generate your template in code as well. So your reports are pretty darn flexible if you use FlexCel. So let's look how we create the template and the report for the master detail relationship. Well, going back to the initial report, you remember that we needed to add a data set to our report. And with FlexCel, that is pretty simple. Let's go into the source code here and look at the generate report method. We only need, and this is really, really crazy if you think about it, we need 3 variables. And I don't have any var variables hidden in here. 3 variables is all it takes to generate the report that you just saw with a preview and everything, you know? So the FlexCel report is the class that we use in order to generate the report. We need 1 stream. In this case, I picked the memory stream. You can pick any other stream in memory. I would suggest I wouldn't write it to disk or anything. So we have the template, which will load the template file. And then we have the output stream, which will carry the generated document that contains the generated report. What we need to do is we need to open the instructors. Here you see one example how to set one of the parameters. Max count is 5. We don't want more than 5 classes listed in our report. Heck, you could even set the SQL statement here. You don't need to set the SQL statement at design time. You can edit at runtime too. So going from there, we initialize our 2 streams with nil. We create the FlexCel report instance. true because we want to make changes. And here is where all the magic happens, and it's really that easy. We add tables, data sources to our report. Back in the examples that I've shown previously, this was only one table with one name. In this case, we need two. We need the instructors and we need the classes, two tables, and thus Q instructors, Q classes. That's it, believe it or not. That's all it takes to make FlexCel aware of the data to be used. The connection between the two tables is being derived from the template. You'll see that in a second. Just let me finish with the technical source stuff. So we create two streams. We load the template into a stream. This is something that has nothing to do with FlexCel. We just load the file, the Excel file, into the stream. This is literally just opening a file stream and loading the file. There you go. Again, I get the application path of the executable and then go up a directory, go down into the assets directory, and that's exactly where we find our template, right here, template. And this is what we'll look at next in detail. Of course, if the file doesn't exist, I throw an exception. Otherwise, I just load the data from the file into the stream. That's all I do. Then I just am able to, after also creating the output stream, removing the position to 0, very, very important, we can run the report. Just like before, no different statement for master detail. It's the same thing. Run. First, I specify my template, then the output stream. And this is the same technicality that I've done before. I have a field inside of this data module right here, which holds my report as an Excel file, which allows me to easily export it into any file format, image, or whatever I need. PDF in this case is being offered. So with this, I free in case there is a report. If it's null, nothing happens. If there is already a report, I free it. And then I create the Excel file based on the stream that I created using the report generation. Again, be certain to move the position to 0 in order to load it properly. And then all I have to do is I close both data sets and free all the variables that I've created here. The only variable that I keep is the report, and the report is being set to nil when I create the data module. And when I free the data module, hopefully I have that in there somewhere. No, I guess I forgot it, huh? So let's add it. See, this is, I have to report it something. So here freport.free, of course, because when we close the application, the report needs to be freed as well. That's it. Or I shouldn't say free when I close the application. I should say when the data module is being freed, I want to clean up the memory properly. So the final step, how do you build your templates for master detail relationships? So we go to the template. And let me make this big, 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 so I can easily see all the things that go on. Again, remember, we reserved two tables, or we added two tables. Table number one was I, the other one was C. I for the instructors, C for the classes. So I can say here, I.name with I.count workouts. That's as simple as it goes. I use the reservation for the specific syntax that FlexCel introduced that I've explained previously in other videos with the brackets here, and then I can say hashtag I dot and then attribute name. I have name and count as my attributes. That's how easy it is. The only thing that's a little bit tricky is you need to define ranges. You need to define the range for your tables. In this case, the instructors include the classes because every instructor has multiple classes, and that's exactly how you arrange your ranges. So this is the range for the instructors, right? You have one instructor containing many classes, and if we go to the data, to the formula, to the name manager right here, we have defined two ranges, one for the instructors and one for the classes. Remember, underscore is something that you can find in the FlexCel documentation. It means, in this case, for each record inside of the data table, generate one of these lines and then push it down. This is exactly what it does. So here we do, for each record inside of the instructors table, insert where the range is defined for I. And I defined I because I had a different resolution, a little bit bigger. I can just define it like here. That is our I, our instructor. So you can also check it if you select it inside of the sheet, like so. Here, you should see the name right here. And that's also how you can set the name. I just don't like it because if you, for example, select it like this, you don't get the name. And then if you were to use the same, you don't know which one it refers to really. So it's really confusing just using the name box. I much rather use the name manager, point here, click here, and then I see the range that has been defined. Okay, going from there. With regards to C, and this is what is so important, C has to be inside of this I, like so. So that means that you can define ranges inside of ranges to get the master detail relationship. So if the I range includes the C range, that is how FlexCel recognizes, oh, inside of my I range, I have a C range, and for each, it's doing the same thing. It's going to the data set, which is mapped as C, and it's going to go through all the records in there. And because FireDAC, whenever you navigate in I, recreates, so to speak, or reselects all the records accordingly in C, you always get the correct records inside of your C data set. When that's an end, it navigates again in I, the query is being updated, and then shows all the C. Navigates in I, updates all the C's, navigates through all the C's, and so on. That is all it is. So this is really the whole template for the report that we've created. So one more time. The I range is right here. No, it is also an empty line, and that is important. This line is also selected because it means this block is being inserted each time a new record in the dataset reference to with I is found. And then FlexCel replaces I.name and I.count with the record from the I dataset. Also finds the C range right here, underscore C, and then replaces the attributes for the current record. And because it's underscore, it navigates to the next record in C until the dataset is at an end, and then navigates in I, creates another I block, and because of that, it finds again a C range, and then for the C range, it navigates all the record in the dataset that is mapped as C. And what are C and I? C is our query classes, and I is our query instructors. And that's how FlexCel is able to do the master detail relationship. And that's why I also only picked one level, because obviously you can have inside of this range, you can have another range and another range. And that's how you can have multiple levels in your report. So let's run this one more time. And then we're at the end of this very detailed how it works with Holger. If you like this, just in general, please give us a thumbs up, and your suggestions are always welcome, what you want to see in the next couple of videos. And be assured, how it works with Holger will always be free on YouTube. So let's click on Generate a Report, and bang. What is that? Well, you have to close the template. If you open it like I opened it here, we save it, because what I did, look here, there is a solution on the documentation for FlexCel. I open this exclusively. I don't open it shared. So there's also a constant as FM share, which you can say basically accordingly in order to basically share deny none if you just want to read and stuff. So one more time, generate a report, and now that we have closed the template, it works as expected. Just as a hint, make sure that you define your ranges accordingly. Like, make sure that your C range is inside of the I range, and FlexCel will be happy. If you want to read the documentation about this, this is where you need to go. You simply Google FlexCel, master detail, VCL, because FlexCel is available for so many different languages. And then you should be getting to the FlexCel Reports Designer Guide on the VCL. And then if you scroll down, here's the named ranges explanation. And here's the master detail explanation. Here, wonderful with colors, you see that on the outside, you have this would be our I range, and in there here is the C range. That's the layout that we have chosen, and that's how easy it is to do master detail with FlexCel. Of course, this example also includes everything you need to do to preview your report. I won't repeat this. That was another how it works with Holger. Thanks for your interest. Stay tuned. There will be plenty more in 2023. Take care.